What if the reason you still don't feel wealthy has nothing to do with how much you earn and everything to do with how you think, wait, and spend when no one's watching? That's the harsh truth about money and why you still don't feel wealthy. Because let's be honest, you've probably done some of the right things already. You've saved, you've worked hard, maybe even invested a little. But that nagging feeling, like you're running in place, that's not an accident. It's the result of silent habits, beliefs, and delays that most people never even question until it's too late. Here is the story of a woman who wasn't struggling. She had a good job, solid income, and a nice apartment in the city. But every month, the same feeling crept in. Like she was sprinting on a treadmill, working harder, but never getting closer to something that actually felt like wealth. She followed all the surface-level advice. Cut back a little, save what you can, invest when it's safe. But deep down, she was frustrated. It wasn't working, not really. Until one afternoon, something clicked. 3 hard truths she had ignored finally hit her at once. First, she realized she'd spent years preparing to build wealth instead of just starting. She was always waiting for permission. Second, she noticed her identity was stuck. She didn't see herself as someone who builds wealth, so her choices followed that belief. And third, it wasn't the big financial decisions holding her back. It was the invisible leaks, the tiny mindless choices she made every single day without even noticing. So she made a decision, not a dramatic one, just a shift. Subtle, intentional, and quiet. She started changing the way she treated her money, her time, and most importantly, herself. And for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Because wealth wasn't some distant milestone. It was something she could start becoming. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel, especially if you're someone who's tired of financial advice that sounds smart but never feels like it works. Here, we go deeper. We talk about mindset, systems, and real wealth, the kind you actually experience, not just imagine. All right, let's begin with the first truth you have to face: the waiting game that silently kills more wealth than bad luck ever could. You'd be surprised how many smart, capable people spend years getting ready to build wealth, reading books, watching videos, thinking about investing, but never actually start. And they don't think of it as procrastination. They call it being responsible or waiting for the right time. But what they don't see is that while they're preparing, planning, and polishing the edges of a someday strategy, time is compounding against them. That's the real trap. Not just the loss of opportunity, but the loss of identity. Because the longer you wait, the more you start to believe wealth just isn't for you. Let's be real. Wealth doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It doesn't show up after the raise, the inheritance, or some magical moment when everything falls into place. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Because the truth is, wealth begins the moment you stop waiting. The people who actually build it, they don't have perfect timing or flawless plans. They start small, they make mistakes, but they begin. And while everyone else is still overthinking, they're already in motion, learning, adapting, compounding. And that someday mindset, it's sneakier than you think. It shows up when you say, "I'll invest when I earn more," or "I'll save once things settle down." But things never settle down, do they? Life doesn't deliver calm. It delivers friction. And wealth is built by moving through that friction, not around it. Ironically, the longer you wait to feel ready, the harder it gets to ever feel like you are. Now let's move on to the next shift, where we dig into the quiet, powerful identity that keeps people locked out of wealth without even realizing it. Because here's the thing, most people don't stay broke because they don't know what to do. They stay broke because of who they think they are. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. When you think about wealth, do you see yourself in the picture or someone else? Because most people don't realize this, but identity is the first and strongest barrier to building wealth. If deep down you believe wealth is for other people, the lucky, the talented, the born into it, then you will unconsciously sabotage every step that moves you toward it. You'll say all the right things, but your actions will quietly drift back toward what feels familiar: comfort, smallness, survival. You see, the problem isn't that people are broken, it's that they've absorbed the wrong story about who they are. And the longer they live by that story, the harder it becomes to imagine a different ending. The truth that hits hardest is this: wealth is a state of mind before it becomes a state of account. If you don't believe you can build it, you won't take the steps that compound it, and you'll keep circling the same habits, wondering why nothing ever feels like progress. This is why people resonate with the video title, "The Harsh Truth About Money," and why you still don't feel wealthy. Because even when income increases, the feeling of scarcity lingers. That's not a financial problem. That's an identity problem. It shows up when you undercharge for your work, when you feel guilty about investing in yourself, or when you delay making bold financial moves because you're not there yet. It's not that you're incapable. It's that you're running software that tells you to play small. And the cruel irony? The people who need to shift this identity the most are usually the ones who've worked the hardest. They've earned the right to feel empowered, but they're still operating like they're stuck. That's not humility. That's hesitation dressed in disguise. Now, let's move on. Because once you shift your identity, there's still one silent enemy left, and it's hiding in plain sight, draining your future one innocent choice at a time. Most people think wealth disappears through big financial mistakes, reckless investments, luxury cars, bad business bets. But in reality, it's the small decisions that quietly drain your future. The $9 subscription you forgot to cancel, the daily impulse buy, the paycheck that vanishes before you even ask where it went. And what's worse, you're not choosing to stay broke. You're just not choosing to stop the leaks. There's a story about a young professional who thought she was doing everything right until a mentor pointed out how $4 lattes, a few streaming subscriptions, and weekly takeout were quietly draining 6 figures from her future potential. It sounds ridiculous until you actually run the numbers. But this isn't about blaming coffee or guilt-tripping your lifestyle. It's about waking up to unconscious behavior. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you simply can't unsee it. And that changes everything. Let me ask you this. What's your financial latte? Maybe it's not coffee. Maybe it's the food delivery app you tap without thinking, or the 5 streaming platforms you barely use. These aren't evil. They're just invisible until they're not. Because over time, these little habits compound in the wrong direction. And by the time most people notice, the money's gone. But once you see your pattern, you can change it. That's the real shift. And here's the deeper truth. Most people don't build wealth because they're bleeding from 1,000 quiet leaks. Not because they're dumb, not because they're lazy, just unaware. The system runs on distraction, and every subscription, every upgrade, every auto-renew is designed to slip under your radar. But you can flip that. You can make every small choice an investment, not a drain. And that's how quiet wealth begins. Not with a big win, but with intentional awareness. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far and want more topics like this, comment the word "more" so I know. So far, we've seen how waiting, identity, and unconscious habits shape your financial reality. But now we need to flip the script. What if you could design a system that builds wealth automatically without relying on willpower? Let's talk about it. We all admire people who seem effortlessly disciplined, the ones who always save, invest, and stay focused. But here's the twist. The most financially successful people aren't relying on discipline at all. They've simply removed the need for it. They don't wake up every day wondering, should I save or spend? That decision was made long ago, and it now runs on autopilot. Wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about what you consistently keep. And the key to keeping more isn't grit or guilt, it's automation. The wealthy build systems that do the right thing without needing to think about it every day. Savings accounts that pull a fixed amount every week. Investments that process before bills. Budgets that operate in the background. The fewer decisions you have to make, the fewer chances you have to mess it up. There's a quote I love from James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, that hits this perfectly. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And that's what most people miss. They set big financial goals, then expect motivation to carry them. But motivation fades, systems stay. So here's the shift. Stop trying to be more disciplined and start designing a life that doesn't require you to be. Because the wealthy don't leave success up to chance. They automate it. They remove friction, reduce temptation, and let compounding take care of the rest. And here's a question to sit with. What system could you set up today that your future self would thank you for every month? Because if you can answer that honestly, even with one small action, you've already changed the game. All right, now let's bring some urgency into the picture. Because if systems are the engine, timing is the fuel. And there's one truth the wealthy understand that most people completely ignore. There's a difference between panic and urgency, but most people never learn to tell them apart. Panic is emotional chaos. Urgency is focused energy. Panic says, it's too late. Urgency says, if I move now, I won't have to catch up later. And this distinction is critical because when it comes to building wealth, those who wait for comfort often end up reacting with fear. Let's be real. Comfort is the biggest enemy of action. The people who build wealth fastest aren't the ones with the best timing. They're the ones who stop negotiating with time. They don't wait for a bigger paycheck or for the economy to settle or for motivation to strike. They act now with what they have, from where they are. That doesn't mean being reckless. It means building momentum, one intentional decision at a time. Because here's the irony. The longer you wait to feel ready, the more likely you are to panic when things shift. And life always shifts. The market moves, prices rise, responsibilities pile up. And the person who spent years getting ready ends up flat-footed while the person who started small just keeps going. And isn't that the real tragedy? Not that people don't know what to do, but that they keep waiting for a sign to start. Well, consider this your sign. The time to begin is now. Not because it's urgent in the chaotic sense, but because the clock is ticking. And the version of you who starts today will outrun the version who keeps stalling every time. So let me ask you this. What would it look like to stop treating wealth as a someday goal and start treating it like a now decision? Now let's talk about what happens when you do, and why that decision, even if it's small, begins to transform everything from the inside out. There's a huge difference between panic and urgency, but most people confuse the two. Panic is fear-driven chaos. Urgency is focused, calm action. And when it comes to building wealth, panic leads to delay, while urgency leads to motion. That's why wealthy people don't wait for the perfect moment. They move early, knowing the perfect moment rarely comes. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Comfort is the enemy of financial freedom. People who wait until they feel ready almost always end up too late. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they let time become their excuse. The wealthy treat time like capital, something to use boldly, not save timidly. This doesn't mean rushing, it means moving with purpose. Taking that first step, no matter how small, is often what separates action takers from dreamers. Because the longer you wait to feel ready, the more life fills that space with distractions, doubt, and delay. You've already seen it, haven't you? Years pass, circumstances change, and suddenly the opportunity you were waiting for looks smaller than the regret you now carry. So here's the moment of truth. What if this, right now, is the best chance you'll ever have to start building real wealth? Let's keep going, because the next shift is where intention replaces reaction. And it's the part where your mindset finally starts to work for you, not against you. Most people live in financial reaction mode. Something breaks. They pay for it. Rent is due. They scramble. A sale pops up. They swipe. But wealth doesn't come from reacting. It comes from intention. And that's the shift that quietly separates those who feel broke from those who finally feel in control. Wealth isn't just about money. It's about how you move. You can't control everything that happens to your finances, but you can control your relationship to money. That's the shift right there. Most people let their environment dictate their behavior. The wealthy do the opposite. They decide how they'll behave first, and then shape their environment to match. And let's be honest, if the harsh truth about money hits close to home, it's probably because you're still reacting to money instead of directing it. Even if your income has improved, you might still be operating with a scarcity reflex. That shows up in the way you budget, if you budget, the way you invest or don't, and the way you either drift or drive toward your goals. Here's the good news. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to take control of one financial decision with intention. Because one intentional move, repeated consistently, is the beginning of real momentum. So ask yourself, what's one financial behavior you could take off autopilot and turn into an intentional habit starting this week? Let's move forward. And now, we'll bring everything together before we close. Because if you've been feeling stuck, what comes next might be the shift you've been waiting for. You can't change your financial future by just thinking about it. You have to restructure your life around it. That doesn't mean tearing everything down. It means aligning your time, your habits, and your cash flow with what you actually want. Because no matter how many books you read or goals you write down, your calendar and your bank statement will always tell the real story. This is the part where most people drift. They assume things will even out over time. But the truth is, without systems in place, nothing changes. You'll keep reacting to bills, repeating emotional spending cycles, and telling yourself that you'll try again next month. And months become years. That's why the wealthiest people treat time like a resource. They block it, protect it, and assign it to actions that compound. So let's get tactical. Start by scheduling a weekly money date, 30 minutes every Sunday to review your spending, automate your transfers, and plan the week ahead. Then set a recurring investment even if it's just 25 hours. Why? Because it's not about the amount. It's about the habit. And as your cash flow becomes more intentional, so does your identity. The difference between someone who stays stuck and someone who builds wealth isn't willpower. It's structure. You don't need to do everything at once. Just one system, 1 hour, one habit that signals, I'm not waiting anymore. Now, let's take a breath. Because in the next lesson, we're going to zoom out and look at how everything we've covered fits together, and how to make it stick for the long haul. So, let's pause and take a deep breath. Because if this video stirred something in you, a little discomfort, a quiet truth, maybe even a touch of hope, then that means it did its job. The harsh truth about money isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to wake you up. Not because you're behind, but because you're not stuck. You're in motion right now. We've talked about why you still don't feel wealthy. Even if you're earning more than ever, it's not your income. It's not your intelligence. It's the fact that wealth has never been about numbers alone. It's about the stories you tell yourself, the systems you live by, and the decisions you make when no one's watching. You've seen how waiting kills momentum, how identity quietly shapes your financial reality, and how tiny habits either compound into wealth or drift you further from it. But you've also seen the way out. Start by rejecting the idea that wealth comes later. It starts now, with one conscious decision: to stop reacting and start rebuilding. Create a system that runs even when you're tired. Block time for money the way you block time for meetings. Automate your good choices so they happen without effort. Treat wealth like a project, one that deserves time, space, and intention. And most importantly, don't try to be perfect. Be consistent. One small shift, one smarter habit, one bold yes to a version of you who takes the wheel. That's how wealth is really built, not through dramatic change, but through quiet, daily alignment. So if any of this resonated, let it be the moment you stop saying, "I'll start soon," and instead say, "I've already started." And if you found value today, I highly recommend watching my next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to leave your comment below. I appreciate your support. Until next time, stay consistent, stay patient, and stay winning. See you in the next one, Money Magician.